One morning in 2022, a letter appeared on Xi Jinping's desk. No courier, no seal, no postage, just his name, handwritten, in his own handwriting, and the date on the envelope, 4 years in the future. Inside, only 7 words. You know, the envelope with no stamp. It was a regular Tuesday morning inside Zongnanhai. Clear skies. No scheduled disruptions. Xi Jinping entered his office at 7:43 a.m., exactly on time. But something was off. On his desk, perfectly centered, was a white envelope. No seal, no stamp, just his name, handwritten. And it was in his handwriting. The pen pressure, the slant, even the way the final stroke curled downward, it was identical. His secretary denied placing it. Surveillance footage showed no one entering. The feed from 3:01 a.m. to 5:14 a.m. had a single anomaly, a 0.7-second glitch. Just static. Inside the envelope was one sheet of paper. Nothing else. No signature. Just a single sentence. You know what you did. She didn't speak. Didn't call security. He just stared at it, quiet, still, as if trying to remember something he hadn't forgotten yet. His pulse remained steady, but his breathing shifted. Not fear. Recognition. He folded the note once, very slowly, and placed it inside his jacket pocket. Then he picked up the phone, not the public line, not the party network, but the scrambled direct line reserved for personal emergencies. The man on the other end answered immediately. She said 5 words. The letter came. Too soon. There was a pause. Then, "Sir, we weren't supposed to send it yet." She hung up. That afternoon, the office was quietly locked down. Not by guards, not by orders, but by protocol, a rule written into the party's internal system under Red Directive 211B. It triggers when a foreign object appears without trace and matches biometric identifiers of the General Secretary. In other words, if something shows up with Xi's own fingerprint, but he didn't put it there, someone has access, and that makes it personal. Internal files flagged the envelope under a new tag. Mirror drop. The phrase wasn't known to most intelligence officers, but to those in the inner chamber, it meant something very specific. A message from the future, sent by the self, as warning or punishment. And it had happened once before. In 2011. To someone else. A name she refused to speak. But the moment he read the note, he whispered it aloud. Then he locked the door behind him. The man who sent it first. Back in 2011, before Xi rose fully into power, there was another figure rising too fast. Chen Xianglin. A mid-level logistics commander with no military background but access to everything. Documents, encryption layers, internal communication tunnels, even the presidential paper trail. He had one job, to keep the state's physical correspondence flow untraceable. But there was something odd about Chen. He didn't use computers. Didn't own a phone. He wrote everything by hand. And he archived copies of every letter sent to or from Zongnanhai. No one cared until a report surfaced. 2 copies of an identical letter. Same handwriting. Same ink density. Dated 5 years apart. Both addressed to the same recipient. One was scheduled for 2016. The other was sent in 2011. Xi's name was on both. But in 2011, he wasn't supposed to receive anything of that kind. Not yet. The letter. It had no content. Just a phrase. Do not let June repeat. Security seized both letters. Chen was summoned. He never arrived. Because he had already disappeared, 48 hours before the report hit the desk. His office was untouched. Drawers locked. No signs of forced entry. Except, his desk drawer contained a stack of blank envelopes. Each with Xi's name. Each dated for different years. and every one of them had been pre-folded. The same fold pattern she would later use in his private notes, before he became General Secretary. So how did Chen know? Was it a warning? A prophecy? Or something far more dangerous? A system of looped messaging built into the party's physical record? A self-sent mail protocol that somehow bypassed time. Later investigations never recovered Chen. No travel records. No arrest warrants. No obituaries. His file was reclassified as non-historical, meaning the party erased not his identity, but the timeline in which he existed. The post office that was never built. In the southern outskirts of Beijing, buried beneath layers of modern infrastructure plans, there's a set of blueprints labeled Facility T-17. On paper, it's an abandoned postal annex, never approved, never funded. But satellite records from 2012 show signs of excavation. Odd, considering the project was supposedly shelved in 2009. The location, an empty square lot surrounded by high concrete walls and unmarked security cameras. She had once passed it during a routine inspection. He paused, asked a single question. Was this ever finished? No one answered. Because no one knew. Not even the city planners. Months later, a party logistics officer submitted a classified memo about intercepted, non-trackable envelopes. They bore no postage, no courier logs, no return addresses. And yet, they moved, physically, from T-17 to Zongnanhai. Each envelope matched Xi's personal stationery, right down to the grain in the paper. Except one thing, the fiber composition was no longer produced. Discontinued in 2004, and still warm when opened. The memo called this temporal correspondence drift. It theorized that a highly experimental facility, possibly T-17, had been used to test time-delayed mail injection. Not email, not digital, but physical paper messages, encoded in location and memory, to trigger only under specific environmental conditions. Time. Touch. Intention. The term coined in the file? Mnemonic mail. It was dismissed as sci-fi, buried under 10 layers of classification. But 1 year later, Xi's envelope arrived, with matching fibers. Inside party walls, the reaction was panicked. 24 security audits launched. The street near T-17 was blocked off indefinitely, labeled a geological hazard zone. But more disturbing than the envelope's origin was the seal on the letterhead. It wasn't the party emblem, nor the national flag. It was a glyph, circular, recursive, an infinite loop intersected by a single vertical line. That same glyph had only been seen once before, on the final page of Chen Xianglin's archived training binder. The one marked, Contingency for Leader Integrity Failure. And that's when it hit them. This wasn't an external threat. It wasn't. The return address was inside the room. Following the envelope's appearance, a small internal unit within Zongnanhai known only as Civic Echo was quietly reactivated. It hadn't been used since 2014, during the last major information breach. This time, their job wasn't to find out where the letter came from. It was to determine where it wanted to return. Under light forensic testing, the envelope's flap revealed a thin adhesive trace, unusual because Xi's stationery was supposed to be sealed using a wet press, not glue. But this adhesive contained microscopic threads of paper pulp consistent with the wallpaper inside Xi's own private study. Not the main office. Not the ceremonial chambers. His personal study, never photographed, never toured, and repainted annually. This implied the envelope hadn't just entered Zongnanhai. It had been formed inside, perhaps even folded and prepared right there. But by whom? That night, a specialized audio scan was run across the study walls. A test designed to detect hidden cavities, magnetic ink, or any material breaks in structure. It pinged. A cavity, just 5 millimeters deep, behind a decorative lacquer panel. Inside was a single object. A black stylus. The kind used for high-pressure signature replication. It matched the ink signature from the note. And its storage tag? Returned, July 6, 2026. 2 years in the future. Meaning, the stylus had already been returned, before it was ever used. She didn't speak for nearly 6 minutes after hearing the report. Then he gave a single order. Seal the study. Move me to the older residence. And bring me the original note again. But it was gone. No envelope. No paper. No fingerprint trace. Just the scent of iron ink and the faintest indentation on the desk, right where the letter had rested. The only evidence left behind? A dry cleaning tag, tucked under his desk mat, from a service that closed in 2025. The date he wasn't supposed to reach. Xi Jinping turned 70 in 2023. He celebrated quietly, no public fanfare, no media spectacles. But inside Zhongnanhai, a private ritual was held. One he hadn't skipped in over a decade. A review of every document labeled Future Sensitive. It was an obscure category buried deep in party archives. Files containing predictions, intelligence forecasts, and self-authored directives. All dated in advance. All written by Xi, under different aliases. One stood out. Directive L14. Do not proceed past 2026. There was no context. Just those words. And a blank space beneath, as if waiting for something to fill it. Now, with the early arrival of the 2026 letter, she realized. The clock had shifted. Whatever was supposed to happen in 2 years had already started. That night, she entered the listening room. A soundproofed vault where only the General Secretary is allowed. Inside were 12 drawers, each labeled with a year, each containing one audio tape, one sealed note, and one object tied to that year's greatest unresolved decision. He opened the 2026 drawer. Empty. Not just the contents, the lining itself had been removed. Stripped clean, exposing bare steel. This wasn't just an early warning. It was a deletion. And someone, maybe even a past version of himself, had already decided to erase what was coming. She placed a fresh envelope into the drawer, sealed it, marked it with the glyph, the infinite loop. He whispered, "Let it find its way back." Then, for the first time in years, he left the listening room unlocked. 3 days later, party surveillance picked up an anomaly in the external mail drop system. One envelope. No courier. No route. No postage. Inside, a blank sheet of paper. Stamped July 6, 2026. Written in Xi's hand. If you're reading this, you weren't supposed to make it this far. But now that you have, you must decide if memory is a weapon or a confession. The envelope was archived. And in Zhongnanhai's restricted logs, one last note. Some letters don't need postage. They just need time. Xi's message wasn't meant for anyone else. It was a reminder to himself. A boundary he was never supposed to cross. But he did. And now, the question is, what happens when the future sends something back? If you want more untold stories from inside the silence, subscribe to Hidden Xi. Because the past never truly